There's a line, a specific boundary the avoidant maintains with almost everyone, a threshold they refuse to cross regardless of how long the relationship lasts or how much pressure exists to cross it, a protective barrier that defines their defended position and protects them from the vulnerability they've spent their life avoiding. The line is clear, is consistent, is maintained so reliably that crossing it seems impossible, seems like something their defended psychology simply cannot do. The avoidant maintains this line with friends, with family, with casual partners, with people they date briefly, with anyone who doesn't threaten their defended position enough to make crossing the line feel necessary. The line protects them from vulnerability that feels dangerous, protects them from intimacy that triggers their wounds, protects them from the exposure that their early experiences taught them leads to hurt. Maintaining the line is how they stay safe, how they maintain control, how they keep themselves protected from the abandonment and powerlessness their wounds taught them to fear. The line is their defense, their protection, their boundary that keeps the world at manageable distance. But with the empath, with the specific person whose love penetrates their defenses in ways nothing else penetrates, whose patience creates safety their system has never experienced, whose understanding reaches the wounded parts they hide from everyone, something different happens. Something impossible. Something that reveals the depth of what they actually feel. They cross the line, cross the boundary they maintain with everyone else, cross the threshold they've never crossed before, cross into territory their defended system exists specifically to avoid. The crossing is rare, is significant, is behavior that proves they're experiencing something different with the empath than they've experienced with anyone else, is evidence that their love for the empath is deep enough to override the defenses that usually prevent the crossing. Understanding what line the avoidant crosses only with the empath they truly love reveals what behavior indicates genuine, deep feeling versus defended casual connection, why the crossing is so significant, what it costs them to cross the line, and why witnessing the crossing should inform your understanding of their feeling without necessarily changing your requirements for what relationship needs to provide beyond the crossing. The specific line, avoidants never cross. Unless they're genuinely in love, what behavior reveals real depth of feeling? There's one specific line that avoidants maintain with everyone, except the person they're genuinely in love with. Understanding what this line is helps you recognize when their behavior indicates real love versus defended connection. They let you see them cry, revealing the emotional vulnerability they hide from everyone else, proving trust that indicates genuine love. The line, emotional vulnerability, specifically crying, showing tears, letting someone witness them in a moment of emotional overwhelm that creates visible crying. The avoidant doesn't cry in front of people, doesn't let anyone see them emotionally overwhelmed, doesn't reveal the depth of feeling that creates tears. The not crying in front of others is strategy, is protection against being seen in vulnerable state, is defense that prevents anyone from witnessing emotional overwhelm that would reveal how deeply they actually feel. They cry alone, in private, where no one can see, where vulnerability can't be witnessed, where emotional overwhelm doesn't create exposure to someone who could use the vulnerability against them. Crying in front of someone requires trust, requires believing the person won't use vulnerability against you, requires feeling safe enough with someone to let them see you in state you normally hide. The avoidant doesn't have this trust with most people, doesn't feel this safety with casual connections, doesn't believe anyone is safe enough to witness their emotional vulnerability without weaponizing it. But with the empath they truly love, something shifts. The safety the empath creates through consistent non-judgmental acceptance, through patient understanding, through loving them through their worst, creates trust the avoidant has never experienced, creates belief that maybe this person is safe, maybe this person won't hurt them for being vulnerable, maybe this person can witness emotional overwhelm without abandoning them for having feelings. The trust makes crossing the line possible, makes letting the empath see them cry conceivable, when letting anyone else see would be impossible. They cry in front of the empath. Let the empath witness the tears. Let the empath see emotional vulnerability they hide from everyone else. The crossing is massive, is behavior that proves they trust the empath more than they trust anyone. They feel safe with the empath in ways they've never felt safe. They love the empath enough to risk vulnerability they've never risked with anyone else. Why crying specifically? Because tears are uncontrollable visibility of internal feeling they've spent lifetime hiding. Crying is specific boundary, because crying is uncontrollable. Can't hide tears once they start. Can't suppress emotional overwhelm once it reaches threshold that creates crying. Can't maintain defended exterior once tears make interior visible. The uncontrollability is what makes crying the ultimate vulnerability for the avoidant. They can control words, can manage what they say to hide what they feel, can control actions, can manage behavior to maintain defended presentation, can control most expressions of emotion, can suppress anger, can hide sadness, can mask fear, but can't control tears once emotional overwhelm crosses threshold. Tears make internal feeling visible in ways that can't be managed or suppressed. Make vulnerability undeniable. Make the depth of feeling they normally hide become visible to whoever witnesses the crying. This visibility is what the avoidant protects against anyone seeing the depth of what they actually feel, protects against emotional overwhelm being witnessed, protects against tears revealing that they feel intensely, despite maintained appearance of not feeling much at all. Crying in front of the empath means they're letting the empath see what no one else sees. They're revealing depth of feeling they hide from everyone. They're making visible the internal experience they've spent lifetime keeping invisible. The revealing is the crossing, is them allowing the empath to see their actual emotional reality instead of the defended presentation they show the world. The crossing proves trust, proves safety, proves love, deep enough to risk vulnerability they risk with no one else. What this crossing costs them, the terror of being seen emotionally overwhelmed, the risk of abandonment for being weak, the vulnerability hangover afterward. Crossing the line costs them terror before the crossing. Terror that showing this vulnerability will result in abandonment. Terror that crying in front of someone will make that person see them as weak and leave. Terror that the empath, despite all evidence of the empath's acceptance, will reject them for being emotionally overwhelmed. The terror is wound-based. Wounds taught them. Vulnerability leads to hurt. Showing weakness leads to abandonment. Letting anyone see you overwhelmed gives them power to destroy you. The terror exists despite the empath's consistent safety. Exists because wounds are deeper than evidence. Costs them shame during the crossing. Shame about crying. Shame about being seen in vulnerable state. Shame about not being able to control the tears. The shame is automatic. Is their wounded system telling them, you're weak for crying, you're pathetic for having feelings, you're disgusting for being overwhelmed? Costs them vulnerability hangover after. After the crying, after the empath has seen them vulnerable, They want to withdraw, want to create distance, want to defend against the vulnerability that was shown by rebuilding defended position more intensely. The hangover is them trying to restore safety through distance after safety was threatened through vulnerability. All of this is what crossing costs them: the terror, the shame, the hangover. All of it makes crossing the line require genuine love, require trust deep enough to override the terror, require safety profound enough to tolerate the shame, require love strong enough to resist the hangover's urge to withdraw. They don't cross for anyone they don't genuinely love. The cost is too high. The crossing only happens when love is deep enough to make the cost feel worth it. The other line's avoidance. Cross only with true love. Additional behaviors that indicate genuine deep feeling. While crying in front of someone is the primary line, other boundaries get crossed only when the avoidant is genuinely in love. Understanding these additional crossings helps you build comprehensive picture. They talk about their childhood wounds, sharing the origin story they never share, revealing the pain that created their defended position. Second line, talking about childhood, about the wounds, about the experiences that created their defended position, about the pain that taught them vulnerability is dangerous and intimacy leads to abandonment. The avoidant doesn't talk about this, doesn't share origin story, doesn't reveal the childhood experiences that created adult patterns. The not sharing protects the wounded parts, protects them from having to relive painful memories, protects them from judgment about their wounds, or their family, or their childhood experiences. With most people, childhood is off limits, is territory they refuse to enter, is past they won't discuss. But with the empath they love, they cross this line. They talk about childhood, share the stories they've never shared, reveal the wounds they've never revealed, explain the origin of patterns in ways that make patterns make sense. The sharing is vulnerability, is them letting the empath see the wounded child beneath the defended adult, is them revealing the pain that created the defending, is them trusting the empath to handle the origin story with care instead of using it as weapon or viewing them differently because of what the childhood reveals. The crossing proves trust, proves they believe the empath is a safe person to know the whole story, proves love deep enough to reveal the wounded origins they hide from everyone else. They ask for help, admitting need instead of maintaining illusion of complete self-sufficiency they present to everyone else. Third line, asking for help, admitting they need something, admitting they can't do something alone, admitting they're struggling and need support. The avoidant doesn't ask for help, doesn't admit need, doesn't reveal struggle. The not asking protects their self-sufficient presentation, protects them from appearing weak or incapable, protects them from depending on anyone in ways that would create vulnerability if the person withdrew help or left. Self-sufficiency is armor, is them maintaining appearance that they don't need anyone for anything, is defense against vulnerability that needing creates. With most people, they maintain the armor, never ask for help, never admit struggle, never reveal they need support. But with the empath they love, the armor drops. They ask for help, admit they're struggling, reveal they need support. Ask the empath for specific thing they need. The asking is vulnerability, is them admitting they're not completely self-sufficient, is them depending on the empath in ways they don't depend on anyone else, is them risking that the empath might say no, or might use their need against them, or might leave because they're not as capable as they present themselves to be. The crossing proves trust, proves they believe the empath will help without judgment, proves love deep enough to reveal need they hide from everyone else. They initiate plans for future together, moving beyond defended present. Focus to imagine shared future they never imagine with casual connections. Fourth line, talking about future. Making plans that involve both people, imagining shared future beyond immediate present. Committing to things that require ongoing connection instead of maintaining present-only focus that allows easy exit. The avoidant doesn't talk about future, doesn't make long-term plans, doesn't imagine shared future with casual connections. The present focus protects them from commitment that feels like trap, protects them from imagining future that might not happen if person leaves, protects them from vulnerability that planning creates when plans require depending on someone being there. With most people, conversation stays in present. Plans are immediate. This week, this month maybe. No discussion of future that requires ongoing connection. No imagining what shared life might look like years from now. But with the empath they love, they cross into future. They talk about it. Make plans that extend beyond immediate present. Imagine what shared life might look like. Commit to things that require ongoing connection, trips, months away, living situations that require continued relationship, plans that assume both people will still be together. The crossing is vulnerability, is them committing to future with person in ways that create dependence on that person being there. Is them risking that talking about future might jinx it, or that committing to future plans might create pressure they can't handle. The crossing proves they see future with the empath. They want shared future. They love the empath enough to risk commitment to future they never commit to with anyone else. The uncomfortable mirror. Turn. Why witnessing the crossing doesn't mean you should accept defended love as sufficient. But if they've crossed the line, if they've cried in front of you, shared childhood wounds, asked for help, talked about future, examine what you're tempted to conclude. Are you tempted to think, this proves they love me, so I should stay, despite the relationship not meeting my needs? Are you using the line crossing as evidence that defended love is becoming accessible love, justifying staying in relationship that's still fundamentally insufficient? Because the crossing proves love, proves genuine deep feeling, proves trust, proves they're experiencing something different with you than with anyone else. But crossing the line once or occasionally isn't the same as sustained emotional availability, isn't the same as consistent vulnerability, isn't the same as the reciprocal partnership you need. They cross the line. The crossing proves love exists. Doesn't prove relationship is functional. Doesn't prove they've developed sustained capacity for vulnerability. Doesn't prove patterns have changed or that relationship can meet your needs just because they've shown vulnerability in specific moments. Don't accept occasional line crossing as substitute for sustained emotional availability. Don't use the crossing to justify staying in relationship that's still not meeting your needs, despite the crossing. The crossing proves they love you. Your needs require more than occasional vulnerable moments, require sustained availability, require consistent reciprocal partnership. The crossing proves feeling, doesn't prove capacity for sustained functional relationship. Use the crossing to confirm they love you. Don't use it to convince yourself insufficient relationship has become sufficient just because they cross line that proves love. Love and capacity are different things. They've proven love through crossing. Still need to prove capacity through sustained work developing ability to maintain vulnerability across time, not just in specific moments. Don't confuse occasional crossing with sustained transformation. What the crossing actually reveals about their internal experience, why the behavior indicates love without indicating readiness. Understanding what the line crossing reveals helps you see it as evidence of feeling without mistaking it for evidence of relationship capacity. The crossing reveals love exists, proving feeling is real, eliminating doubt that they're capable of deep emotion. The crossing proves something crucial. They love you. The love is real, is deep, is genuine feeling, not performed connection or defended casual attachment. They don't cross the line unless love exists. Don't cry in front of someone unless they trust that person profoundly. Don't share childhood wounds unless they feel safe with that person. Don't ask for help unless they depend on that person. Don't talk about future unless they want shared future with that person. All the crossings prove love exists, is real, is deeper than their defended presentation suggests. The proof eliminates doubt, eliminates wondering if they're capable of feeling deeply, eliminates questioning whether they love you or just tolerate you. The crossing proves they love you. Use this proof to validate yourself, to confirm your worth, to recognize you're creating genuine deep feeling in them. The validation is gift. Is confirmation that problem isn't whether they love you. Problem is whether they can translate love into functional partnership. The crossing proves love exists, doesn't prove translation exists. Both truths matter. The crossing reveals trust you've created, proving safety that makes vulnerability possible, showing your exceptional capacity created exceptional trust. The crossing also proves you've created trust, created safety, created environment where vulnerability feels possible to someone for whom vulnerability usually feels impossible. The trust you've created is rare, is exceptional, is trust the avoidant doesn't have with anyone else. Your patience created it. Your understanding created it. Your non-judgmental acceptance created it. Your loving them through their worst created it. The trust is testament to your capacity, to your exceptional nature, to your ability to create safety for deeply wounded person. The crossing proves your capacity is real. Your exceptional nature is real. You're a person who creates trust that allows vulnerability in someone who's defended against vulnerability with everyone else. Use this proof to validate your capacity, to recognize your exceptional nature, to confirm your person who creates profound safety. The validation should inform your understanding. You're exceptional. You deserve partner who recognizes exceptional and honors it. Partner who has your capacity or who's done work to develop capacity that matches yours. The crossing proves you created exceptional trust. Use that proof to require you be honored with exceptional reciprocal partnership, not just occasional vulnerable moments that exceptional trust made possible. The crossing reveals they're struggling between love and defense. The behavior shows internal conflict, not resolved transformation into available partner. The crossing also reveals they're in conflict. Conflict between love and defense, between wanting to be vulnerable and needing to stay protected, between trusting you and fearing vulnerability you've earned trust for. The crossing is them choosing love over defense in specific moment, is them overriding defended position temporarily to show you what they feel. But temporary override isn't permanent transformation. Is them struggling? Is internal conflict being resolved toward vulnerability in specific moment, but not being permanently resolved? After crossing, they often withdraw, rebuild defenses, return to defended position. The return proves crossing was moment of love, overriding defense, not permanent transformation where defense is dissolved. They're struggling. The struggle is evidence they love you. Wouldn't struggle if they didn't care. The struggle is also evidence they're not ready, wouldn't return to defended position after crossing if transformation was complete. The crossing reveals ongoing internal conflict, reveals they're torn between love and defense, reveals love is strong enough to create occasional crossings, but defense is still strong enough to return after crossings occur. The revelation should inform your understanding. They love you and they're still defended. Both are true. The occasional crossing doesn't resolve the ongoing defended position. The love creates moments of vulnerability. The defense creates return to unavailability after moments end. Understanding the conflict helps you see. Crossing proves love, doesn't prove readiness for sustained partnership. Why the crossing creates temporary hope that often leads to extended waiting. The pattern the empath must recognize. Understanding the pattern that often follows the crossing helps you avoid the trap of waiting indefinitely for occasional vulnerability to become sustained availability. The crossing creates hope. Transformation is beginning, making you think maybe this is breakthrough moment where defended position finally dissolves. They cross the line. Let you see them cry. Share childhood wounds. Ask for help. Talk about future. The crossing feels significant, feels like breakthrough, feels like maybe this is the moment where defended position cracks enough to let transformation begin, the moment where occasional vulnerability becomes consistent availability, the moment where they finally become the partner you've been hoping they'd become. The hope is natural. Is reasonable response to significant behavior. Is you recognizing that crossing the line indicates something important is happening, but the hope often proves premature? The crossing is moment, is not transformation. Is them being vulnerable in specific instance, not them having developed sustained capacity for vulnerability across time and contexts. The hope makes you wait, makes you think, they've shown they can be vulnerable. Now I just need to be patient while vulnerability becomes consistent. Makes you believe transformation is beginning when actually what's happening is occasional override of defense, not dissolution of defense. The waiting based on hope from crossing often extends indefinitely. Extends because you're hoping each crossing means transformation is progressing when crossings are just moments of vulnerability surrounded by ongoing defended position. The pattern traps you in waiting for transformation that occasional crossings suggest is happening, but that isn't actually occurring without sustained therapeutic work. The pattern, crossing, then withdrawal, then long defended period, then another crossing. Cycle that creates illusion of progress without actual change. The pattern is predictable. They cross the line, show vulnerability. You feel hopeful, then they withdraw, create distance, return to defended position, remain defended for extended period, weeks, months. The defended period makes you doubt, makes you wonder if crossing meant anything, makes you question whether they love you. Then another crossing happens, another moment of vulnerability, another line being crossed. Hope returns. Cycle repeats. Cross, withdraw, defend, cross again. Each crossing creates hope. Each defended period between crossings creates doubt. The cycle creates illusion of progress, creates sense that they're slowly becoming more available, creates belief that crossings are increasing or that defended periods are shortening. But often, the pattern is stable. Crossings happen with same frequency. Defended periods last same duration. No actual progress is occurring, just cycle repeating. Cycle that creates illusion of movement when actually dynamic is static. Occasional vulnerability, followed by sustained defending. Repeat indefinitely. Recognizing this pattern is crucial. Recognizing that crossings aren't progress unless frequency is increasing, defended periods are shortening, and therapeutic work is occurring that creates actual transformation rather than just occasional vulnerable moments. Without therapeutic work, crossings are just moments that repeat without creating actual change in defended position that dominates the relationship. Breaking the pattern requires recognizing that line crossing proves love, not capacity, and requiring sustained work developing capacity, not accepting occasional vulnerability as sufficient. Breaking the pattern requires distinction, requires recognizing crossing proves love, doesn't prove capacity. Love without capacity is insufficient for relationship. Occasional vulnerability without sustained availability doesn't meet your needs. The distinction is what breaks the pattern, is what stops the waiting, is what shifts from hoping crossings mean transformation to requiring evidence of actual transformation through sustained therapeutic work. Require the work, not just the crossings. Require them using the love. Crossings prove to motivate addressing the wounds that make sustained vulnerability impossible. Require therapy with attachment specialist. Require sustained work over months and years. Require demonstrated progress in developing capacity for consistent availability, not just occasional vulnerable moments. Require behavioral evidence of transformation, not just occasional crossings that prove love. The requiring breaks the pattern, breaks the cycle of hoping each crossing means transformation, breaks the illusion that occasional vulnerability is progress towards sustained availability, breaks the trap of waiting indefinitely for transformation that crossings suggest but sustained work would actually create. They cross the line, proves they love you, require they do work that makes love sustainable, require the work within timeline, leave if work isn't happening. That's how you break the pattern. That's how you stop waiting for occasional vulnerability to become sustained partnership. The final truth about the line: avoidants cross only with true love. There's a line avoidants maintain with everyone. Line that protects them from vulnerability that feels dangerous. Line they refuse to cross regardless of relationship duration or external pressure. The line is boundary, is their protection, is threshold that keeps them safe from exposure. Their wounds taught them to fear. But with the empath they truly love, with the person whose patience creates unprecedented trust, whose understanding reaches wounded parts they hide, whose love penetrates defenses nothing else penetrates. They cross the line, cross the boundary they maintain with everyone else. Let the empath see them cry, share childhood wounds, ask for help, talk about future. Cross into vulnerability they cross into with no one else. The crossing is significant, is behavior that proves they love you, trust you, feel safe with you in ways they've never felt safe, experience something different with you than they experience with anyone. The crossing proves genuine love, proves deep feeling, proves trust that indicates you've created something rare. But the crossing doesn't prove readiness, doesn't prove capacity for sustained partnership, doesn't prove transformation has occurred or relationship can meet your needs. The crossing proves love, proves occasional vulnerability, doesn't prove consistent availability, doesn't prove sustained capacity, doesn't prove they've developed ability to maintain vulnerability across time instead of just in specific moments. Don't confuse crossing with capacity. Don't mistake occasional vulnerability for sustained transformation. Don't accept line crossing as sufficient evidence relationship has become functional when relationship still lacks the consistent emotional availability you need. They cross the line because they love you. The crossing proves it. Use the proof to confirm your worth, to recognize you're creating genuine deep feeling, to eliminate doubt about their capacity for love, then require. They translate love into partnership. They do work that makes occasional vulnerability into sustained availability. They develop capacity that lets them maintain the vulnerability crossings reveal instead of returning to defended position after each crossing. They prove through sustained therapeutic work and demonstrated behavioral change that love is becoming accessible partnership, not remaining defended feeling with occasional vulnerable moments. The crossing proves they love you. Your needs require more than proof of love, require sustained available partnership, require consistent vulnerability, require reciprocal relationship where emotional availability is norm, not exception. The crossing should validate. You're worthy of this. You've created trust that proves you deserve partner who can sustain vulnerability. Use validation to require sustained partnership. Don't accept occasional crossing as sufficient. They've proven love through crossing. Require them, prove capacity through sustained work. Require the work within timeline. Leave if work isn't occurring. That's answer to recognizing they've crossed the line they crossed with no one else. Not staying because crossing proves they love you. Requiring they develop sustained capacity that love alone doesn't create. Love is starting point. Capacity is requirement. They've shown starting point through crossing. Require the end point through work. Don't accept starting point as destination. They love you enough to cross the line. Require they love you enough to do the work that makes crossing sustainable rather than momentary. They love you enough to cross the line. Require they love you enough to do the work that makes crossing sustainable rather than momentary. The specific ways. The crossing affects the avoidant. After it happens, understanding the vulnerability, hangover that often follows. Understanding what happens inside the avoidant after they cross the line helps you recognize why withdrawal often follows vulnerability and why this pattern reveals their ongoing defended position despite the crossing. They experience shame about having been vulnerable. Their wounded system tells them they were weak, creating urgent need to rebuild defended walls. After the crossing, after crying in front of you, after sharing childhood wounds, after asking for help, shame arrives. Intense shame. Shame that says, you were weak. You exposed yourself. You gave them power to hurt you by showing them your wounds. The shame is automatic. Is their wounded system's response to vulnerability. Is internalized voice from childhood telling them that showing feelings is weakness, that needing help makes you pathetic, that crying means you're broken. The shame creates urgent need to restore defended position, to rebuild the walls, to create distance that protects them from having been seen in vulnerable state. The urgency manifests as withdrawal, as creating space after the crossing, as becoming more defended after a moment of being less defended. The withdrawal confuses you. You witnessed vulnerability. You responded with care and acceptance. You did nothing to warrant the withdrawal. But the withdrawal isn't about you. Is about their internal shame, response to having been vulnerable. Is their system trying to restore safety through distance after vulnerability created feeling of danger regardless of your actual response? Understanding the shame helps you see. The withdrawal after crossing isn't rejection of you. Is protection against their own shame about having been vulnerable. Is them managing internal experience that tells them vulnerability was mistake even when your response proved vulnerability was safe. The shame-driven withdrawal is pattern, is what happens after almost every crossing, is evidence that crossing was moment of vulnerability, not evidence of transformed capacity to sustain vulnerability without shame-driven need to withdraw afterward. They test whether you'll use the vulnerability against them, watching carefully to see if you weaponize what they revealed, treating trust as conditional rather than established. After crossing, they test. Test whether you'll use the vulnerability against them. Test whether you'll reference what they shared in ways that feel weaponizing. Test whether you'll treat them differently now that you've seen their wounds. The testing is wound-driven. Wounds taught them. People use your vulnerability against you. Show weakness, and people exploit it. Let someone see your wounds, and they'll poke those wounds when it serves them. The wounds make trust conditional. Make them believe. You might seem safe now, but eventually, you'll prove you're not safe by using what I showed you against me. The testing manifests in specific ways. They watch how you reference the vulnerable moment. Watch whether you bring it up casually or keep it private. Watch whether you use it to explain their behavior in ways that feel reducing. You're just acting this way because of your childhood wounds. Watch whether you treat them more carefully in ways that feel like pity rather than respect. Any sign you're using the vulnerability wrong triggers their fear. Triggers belief that they were right to never be vulnerable because vulnerability gives people weapons. The testing is exhausting for both people. For you, because you're being watched and evaluated when you did nothing wrong. For them, because they're hyper-vigilant about whether trust was a mistake. Understanding the testing helps you navigate it. Navigate by being careful with what they shared, by not referencing vulnerable moment casually, by not using their wounds to explain their behavior, by treating vulnerability they showed as sacred trust, not as information you now have about them that changes how you see them. Pass the testing by proving vulnerability was safe, by demonstrating you won't weaponize what they revealed, by showing trust was deserved. Passing might allow future crossings. Failing confirms their wounds and prevents future vulnerability. They need reassurance you still respect them. Vulnerability feels like it diminishes them, requiring confirmation that revealing weakness didn't make you see them as less. After crossing, they need reassurance. Need to know you still respect them, still see them as capable, still view them as strong despite witnessing their vulnerability. The need is wound-based. Wounds taught them. Vulnerability makes you less than. Showing weakness means people lose respect for you. Revealing you're not completely self-sufficient makes others see you as inadequate. The wounds make them believe. Crying in front of you made you see them as weak. Sharing childhood wounds made you see them as damaged. Asking for help made you see them as incapable. The belief creates need for reassurance, need for evidence you don't see them as less than, need for confirmation that vulnerability didn't diminish your respect. Provide the reassurance carefully, not through pitying them or treating them fragile, through continuing to see them as capable, through not treating them differently, through showing that vulnerability didn't change your respect, if anything, increased your respect for their courage in being vulnerable. The reassurance they need isn't, it's okay that you're weak, is, you're strong for being vulnerable. You're courageous for trusting me with your wounds. You're capable even while asking for help. The distinction matters. Reassurance that treats them as less than confirms their fears. Reassurance that honors their strength while acknowledging their vulnerability provides what they need. Give them evidence that crossing the line didn't diminish them in your eyes. That vulnerability made them more human, not less worthy. That you respect them as much or more after witnessing their wounds. The reassurance might allow future crossings, might create sense that being vulnerable with you doesn't cost them your respect, might build trust that vulnerability is safe with you specifically even when their wounds say vulnerability is never safe. Why some avoidants cross the line once and never again when the crossing creates too much fear to repeat. Understanding why some avoidants cross the line once but never repeat the crossing helps you recognize when one-time vulnerability indicates their absolute limit rather than beginning of increased availability. The vulnerability felt too dangerous to repeat. One crossing confirmed their worst fears about exposure, preventing future vulnerability regardless of your response. Some avoidants cross once, let you see them cry once, share one childhood wound, ask for help one time, and never cross again. Never allow that vulnerability again, regardless of how long relationship continues. The one-time crossing reveals they reached their limit, reached the absolute edge of their capacity for vulnerability. The crossing felt so dangerous, created so much fear, generated so much shame, that repeating feels impossible regardless of your response to the first crossing. Your response might have been perfect, might have been exactly what they needed, might have proven you're safe, but their internal experience of the vulnerability was so terrifying that proving you're safe doesn't override the terror of being vulnerable again. The one-time crossing is them testing their limit and discovering, this is the limit. This is as vulnerable as I can be. Going here once was possible. Repeating is impossible because the fear and shame are too overwhelming. Understanding this helps you recognize some avoidants have very limited capacity, have threshold for vulnerability that's extremely low, can cross the line once as an ultimate act of love or trust, but can't sustain crossing or repeat crossing because capacity doesn't exist. If they cross once and never again, despite your perfect response, you're seeing their limit. Seeing that capacity for vulnerability is more restricted than you hoped. Seeing that occasional crossing isn't going to become repeated crossing without sustained therapeutic work developing capacity that doesn't currently exist. They're waiting to see if you leave before crossing again, testing whether you'll stay after seeing their wounds, using your staying as prerequisite for future vulnerability. Some avoidants cross once and then wait. Wait to see what you do. Wait to see if you leave. Wait to see if witnessing their vulnerability changes your behavior in ways that prove they were right to fear being vulnerable. The waiting is test. Test of whether you'll stay after seeing their wounds, whether you'll keep loving them after witnessing their vulnerability, whether revealing their defended position's origin makes you decide they're too damaged to stay with. The test takes time, takes months, sometimes. They're watching whether you reference the vulnerable moment against them, watching whether you treat them differently, watching whether you eventually leave because of what you saw. If you stay, if you continue loving them, if you don't weaponize what they shared, if you prove through sustained presence that vulnerability was safe, they might cross again, might allow another vulnerable moment, might slowly increase frequency of crossings as your staying proves they're safe with you. But if you leave, or if you do anything that feels like using vulnerability against them, the crossing remains one-time event, remains their proof that vulnerability is dangerous and they were right to avoid it. Understanding the waiting helps you recognize your sustained safe presence after crossing matters more than your immediate response to crossing. They're testing whether safety is sustainable, whether you're a safe person across time, not just in moment of their vulnerability. Your staying without weaponizing becomes prerequisite for future crossings. The crossing exhausted their capacity. Vulnerability required every ounce of courage they had, leaving nothing left for repeating the behavior without significant recovery time. Some avoidants cross once and need extensive recovery time before crossing again. Need months or years to rebuild the courage that the first crossing exhausted. The crossing required everything. required every ounce of trust they had, required overriding every wound-based warning their system was screaming, required accessing vulnerability that their entire defended position exists to prevent accessing. The effort of crossing depleted them, depleted their capacity for vulnerability completely, left them needing extended time to recover before having capacity to cross again. The depletion is real. Is their nervous system being completely overwhelmed by the vulnerability? Is them needing time to regulate after dysregulation the crossing created? Is recovery period being necessary before they can access vulnerability again without becoming completely overwhelmed? Understanding the depletion helps you calibrate expectations, helps you recognize one crossing might represent their total current capacity, might require significant time before they can access that capacity again, might need you to be patient with very long timeline between crossings while they recover capacity that the crossing exhausted. If recovery time is years, if they can only cross the line once every few years, because each crossing depletes capacity completely, this reveals extreme limitation, reveals capacity is so restricted that functional partnership requiring consistent vulnerability is impossible without sustained therapeutic work developing greater capacity. Don't wait years between crossings. Recognize extreme depletion as evidence capacity needs professional development, not just time to recover.